Welcome to part 2 of 2 about setting up and installing your swing axle, transaxle, and your air-cooled VW. In part 1, I covered how reinforcement plates can help prevent leaks in your axle flanges and how to install your swing axles. Part 2 covers the earth-shattering topic of bolting your transaxle to the chassis and installing the brake backing plates and axle covers. I just know you're on the edge of your seat.
Okay, so I've got the transaxle on the floor. I moved it off the stand, nearly broke my back doing that. I recommend getting help if you want to do this. I've wrapped up the frame horns with some padding here, and I've wrapped up the swing plates so that when I install this, it doesn't scratch up my powder coating here. I have new hardware. I've got the nose cone mounting gizmo. I have the rear cradle attached, new hardware, nuts and washers, and I've got my grommets that I need.
First thing to do is install the transaxle mount bushing.
It inserts right there, and then this part of the nose cone mount is going to slide in there like that. And I think what it does is somehow insulates the car from vibration. I don't know how effective it is, but that's the intended purpose. Okay, these studs, I always put anti-seize on everything, especially stuff that's underneath the car. You'll thank yourself if you ever have to pull this off. This is the nose cone rubber bushing, and this just slides onto the tip of the transaxle right here. Fits in there right like that. Okay, there's a little notch here. And this notch should face upwards. It fits into this part of the transaxle nose cone. Tilt this back. Slide those in. And then, can't really see this, but I'm going to put these washers on, these wave washers, and I'm just going to finger tighten these nuts down.
Frame horn bolts at the rear get anti-seize too. I'm setting them up now so I can grab them in a minute. Here I am slowly raising up my transaxle into place, balanced on a board. It's probably best to work with a helper, but it can be done alone. Get the tip of the nose cone into the opening on the chassis behind the inspection hole, and lower into place so the nose cone mount slides over the two studs in the back of the chassis. Once that's in, you can lower the rear into place. Then quickly thread in the two rear mounting bolts. Just loosely tighten all your hardware for now or you'll ruin everything. Alright, I'm just kidding. But actually I'm not. Don't tighten it yet.
Okay, wave washer.
Finger tighten the front mount to the studs on the chassis.
Followed by a nut.
The sequence of tightening the hardware is from the front to the rear.
Alright, so here I am underneath everything, crawling on the floor of the garage. So these two bolts, I'm going to tighten those first. I like to do everything by the book, so these get tightened down to 14 foot-pounds. All right, so that's not going to go in. There's something else out for that one.
Okay, so this is where things get a little funky. The nut on the left takes a 17mm socket, but that same nut won't work on the right stud because of the narrow shape of the metal in the nose cone. So I have to substitute a cylinder head stud nut that has the same 10mm inner diameter, but takes a 15mm socket. Both nuts get torqued down to 14 foot-pounds.
And the transmission ground strap also has to go here.
Next, tighten the two transaxle mount to chassis nuts to 25 foot-pounds. Real mechanics tighten nuts and bolts by feel, but us YouTube mechanics should rely on a torque wrench.
Okay, so this is like a heavy-duty kind of rubber bushing that fits between the bell housing of the transaxle and the bracket that bolts into the frame horns. And this also supposedly is going to insulate the car against vibration and noise, but you know, it's an air-cooled Volkswagen, so it's not going to do a heck of a lot in that regard, but that's what it's there for. Okay, so these get tightened down to 166 foot-pounds. Don't actually have a torque wrench that goes to 166, so I'll have to use a cheater bar. Okay, this is not really accurate, but it's gonna be close enough. Just gonna snug it down. Okay, and lastly, these bolts get torqued down to 14 foot-pounds. Okay, next I'm gonna uncover this. See what we have going on underneath here.
Now I'm ready to move on to bolting the swing axles onto the spring plates. There are 3 bolts here, 2 short and 1 long. The longer bolt goes on top along with the suspension snubber bracket.
So I'm gonna get the washer on the outer side, lock washer on the inner side.
I'm torquing the spring plate bolts to 72 foot-pounds and then repeating the process on the opposite side.
I was on YouTube watching a video of Beetle assembly line, and they showed 2 guys installing a transaxle, and they just slid it in, bolted it on. Probably took them less than 5 seconds. It's taking me considerably longer, but this is not an assembly line. All right, I'm gonna torque shock absorbers down to 43, and then I'm basically done with this. All right.
So the transaxle is in. It's looking good. Next thing is to bolt on the brake backing plate, spacer, O-rings, washers, gasket, and cover plate.
If you have a 65 through 68, an oil slinger sits inside here. The end of the axle goes through here, and any oil that gets through goes out through this little drain hole, comes out this little hole here, and then as it sits here on the brake backing plate, this is the corresponding hole. And so any oil from transaxle that leaks out of the axle tube will go through this hole and will harmlessly dribble down the back and onto the street. Like I said, I really didn't care about the environment, just going to be a few drops anyway. I'm going to install this seal now. First, the oil slinger goes in, so I'm just going to add a little bit of oil on that. Don't forget your oil slinger. It sits on a little lip inside. This should be able to move freely once it's installed. It's not in all the way yet. So I have this tool that I picked up from AutoZone. Can we turn it? I give you your money back. This is an old seal that I took out, so I'm going to use that to protect it. If that's in all the way. Hard for the camera to pick this up, but you can see looking inside this edge right here, see the seal is fully seated, and here is that hole where the oil will leak should it come past the oil slinger, come out the bottom right there. So we just give it one more whack just to be super safe. Okay, that's in. It's not going anywhere. I just need to do the next one.
You get 2 gaskets in the kit, but you only need 1 unless you're working on a bus. I glued the gasket onto the axle cover with Permatex, making sure the drain hole is not covered.
First bit that gets installed is this washer. Followed by this small O-ring. And you want to be sure not to cut it on the splines of the axle shaft. Slides right on there like that. Next thing that goes on is the brake backing plate, and you want to make sure that you put the left side on the left and the right side on the right. And the way that I know this is correct is because the bracket for the e-brake cable is on the left. The bracket comes from the front of the car and goes towards the back. So I know this is the correct side. Don't want to mix those up. set that here. Another set of hands would be helpful right now, but I'm working alone. So that's going to want to tip a little bit. Next thing that goes on is an O-ring that goes around the bearing. Get a little oil on here. Fits around here like so. The important thing is that you bolt the axle cover on, you don't pinch the O-ring and break it. If you do, you might have a leak. Next, and the last thing that goes on is the axle cover. The outer spacer is going to insert in here. So I'm going to get a little oil on that. There's a beveled edge that goes towards the inside. The flat side goes towards the outside. The beveled edge goes towards the inside because that's where the smaller rubber O-ring is going to fit. So I'm going to insert this here first into the seal. And I put my bolts through here. And I've already put anti-seize in all these bolts. And holding this in place so it's not crooked, my third hand, I'll use my knee. There we go. And the drain hole is on the bottom of the axle cover. Okay, it's on. A lot of people make this look easy. I make it look hard. It's not really hard, it's just you gotta make sure that it goes on perfectly. You don't pinch your O-rings, and you don't drop your nuts and bolts on the floor, and you don't smear gasket sealer everywhere, and you get it on evenly. Okay, these bolts get torqued down to 43 foot-pounds, and then I'm in business. All right, doesn't that look pretty?
So there it is. Axle and reinforcement plates installed in part 1. In part 2, I installed the transaxle, backing plates, and axle covers. It's looking good. It's looking professional. We laughed, we cried, and we learned important life lessons on the way.
And I did it!
Wow, these graphics are fancy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications.
It's a waste of money and a waste of time. An Italian bastard child.